Welcome everyone to Train Tuesday. If you are joining us live tonight on the live stream, welcome aboard. So nice to have you on here tonight with us. If you are watching us later on YouTube, thank you for joining us and checking out all the neat stuff that's going to be available in October for pre-order. Tonight we'll be talking about some GP38-2s as well as some 50-foot boxcars that will surely come in handy on your layout module or Fremo module. Let's do a quick round of shout outs, see who is joining us. I've got Les, Abel, Tyler, BNSF at 9708, LeVar, Idaho Railfan, Jerry, Terry, Danny, Anissa, Derek Glass is in the house, Delta 9, just to name a few. We've got a good crowd showing up here. Like I mentioned earlier, we're going to be talking about Athearn Genesis GP38-2s and some Athearn HO 50-foot boxcars. Now, you've probably realized, depending on where you're at, it's getting a little bit cooler. The days are getting shorter, the nights are getting longer. That is a cue for all of us to enter a new phase of model railroading. This is probably one of my favorite times of year when I get to transition from rail fanning to coming inside and working on the layout. And I hope you all out there are doing the same. Let's do another round of shout outs and then we will get started with Train Tuesday. I've got Rick, Dale, Mike, JGood30, Midwest Rail Fan, Are You a Train Man Too, Rick Schmidt, Chessie, Mike. I saw Dave out there, Donnie, Calculated Snipe, Lewis, Rojo Rail Fan, and Abel. Thank you for joining us tonight. Once again, I am very happy that you're on board with us. And let's get started with another Train Tuesday. We're going to be starting with Genesis tonight. We're going to be talking about the EMD GP38-2. So this is considered by many to be one of the workhorses of railroading, even today. A little bit of background on the EMD GP38-2. It was by the early 1970s that many first-generation diesels were reaching the end of their service lives. The most common replacement locomotive became the GP38-2. Now, EMD began producing the 16-cylinder non-turbocharged 2,000 horsepower unit in 1972. Unlike the GP38's engine, which drove a generator to supply power to the traction motors, the GP38-2 prime mover drove an alternator which produced AC electrical current that was then rectified to DC to power the 4 traction motors. Another major change for the GP38-2 was the introduction of the Dash 2 modular electrical cabinet, something we've talked about in the past on the show. For more than 40 years, the GP38-2 has worked mainline freights, locals, switching jobs, yard service, helpers, snow fighting trains, and even hump power. And many of these are still in service today. Now, it's hard to go rail fanning and not see one of these locomotives. And like I said, they've been out here for well over 40 years. And we're going to start tonight with Norfolk Southern. These are based on the split of Conrail. So these are Conrail units. Both CSX and NS received former Conrail GP38-2s as part of their deal. Norfolk Southern began to patch them into their number series. Some also received full repaints while keeping their Conrail features, such as the small EMD front plow, front and rear ditch lights, and cab signal box. Another unique feature were the originally installed class lights on both ends, when most railroads had removed theirs. Here we've got 5280. This is based on a paint scheme of the early 2000s. This is former Conrail 8077. Now this is a mid-phase production GP38-2. It has the chicken wire grills, the drop steps on both ends, the squared paper air filter box, rear wheat cutter plow, and 4-stack exhaust. You'll also notice this one rides on Blomberg M trucks. Here's number 5295. Again, this is another early 2000s paint scheme. This is former Conrail 8100, and this too is a mid-phase production run. This has got the chicken wire grills, drop steps on both ends, squared paper air filter box, standard 2-stack exhaust, and it also rides on Blomberg M trucks. Now, the last one in the series for Norfolk Southern, once again, it is a former Conrail unit. This is a former Conrail number 8166, but this is a late phase. This has the corrugated grills, the front anti-climber, and rear drop step. It also has the rear weed cutter plow, angled paper air filter box, and if you look carefully, you'll see that it has 2 exhaust stacks, but they're flush. And this one rides on Blomberg B trucks. So if you're modeling the Norfolk Southern right after the split of Conrail, these are going to work out great for you, as well as the next set that I'm going to show you. Anybody that's modeling the late 1990s into the 2000s, and these can be found on any railroad, are the EMD lease units. Now, after their initial lease expired, many of the Conrail GP38-2s were returned to EMD, which in turn leased them back to other railroads. Now, quite a few of these remained simply patched, but a batch of them also got the full EMD lease paint treatment, like we're going to see here. During the 1990s, these could be found on just about any railroad. 788, which we're going to talk about first, was painted into a unique Operation Lifesaver scheme. Now, it's true, I saw these on the BNSF in the Galesburg area in the late 90s into the early 2000s. And this one right here, EMDX 788, this is based on a 1990s paint scheme. It's a former Conrail unit. 7988 was the original Conrail number. This is a mid-phase with chicken wire grills, Operation Lifesaver paint scheme. It has the Leslie 3-chime horn, front small EMD plow, while the rear is the weed cutter plow. And it's a rather unique scheme. It's the only one in this run painted up like this, and one of the few. So definitely a really unique paint scheme. This one's probably more common, more familiar to most of you. This is EMDX 813. Now, this is another Conrail, a former Conrail unit, 8013. It too is a mid-phase with chicken wire grills. It has a 4-stack exhaust, a Nathan 3-chime horn, front small EMD plow, a rear weed cutter plow, black fuel and air tanks, and it also has small cab numbers. A little bit different from the next one that we're going to show you, which is number 825. Slightly different variation on a theme here. Now this 825 is a former Conrail unit 8025. It too is a mid-phase with the chicken wire grills, a Nathan 3-chime horn. This one though has a front weed cutter plow, maroon fuel and air tanks, unlike the black one of its cousin 813, large cab numbers, and it was named the Kristen. So these are perfect if you're running, like I said, the 1990s into the early 2000s, because they can run on any railroad. And I can certainly attest to the fact that these were found just about anywhere. So as long as you're operating in the 1990s into the 2000s, any 3 of these locomotives would be perfect for some power-starved railroad that's out there. Now, coming up next, we're going to talk about the Burlington Northern Santa Fe. And this was an interesting time for the Burlington Northern Santa Fe. Once the Burlington Northern and Santa Fe railroads merged in 1996, several new paint schemes were attempted, including variations of the Superfleet and the Great Northern schemes. After some deliberation, BNSF 2099 was repainted in 1996 in what would be known as the Heritage 1 scheme. Being that it was the first unit painted, it exhibited a major difference from later repaints in that it had a silver underframe, where future units in this scheme, other than the -944 CWs, would have green underframes. And here's more of the standard type paint scheme of the Heritage 1. This is BNSF 2081. This is based on an early 2000s paint scheme. It has the early body, wide fans, and the headlight is on the cab. I don't know about you. I always thought this was one of the better paint schemes that BNSF had. This was before they had the swoosh or the wedge. This was the circle cross, as it's been called lately, and the sans serif font on the car body. Really a sharp looking paint scheme, definitely pays homage to the Great Northern. Now here's 2099. This is the one that they were talking about earlier. This is one of the first repaints. This is a 1990s into the early 2000s paint scheme. It's going to feature the early body, close fans, headlight on the cab, and this is the only one that's going to have the silver underframe. Rather unique. You'll also notice some other differences. Just look at the font on the cab compared to the other two. A little bit smaller. 2277 represents a more standard Heritage 1 paint scheme. This is a 1998 paint scheme, but certainly lived well into the 1990s, into the early 2000s. It too is an early body, close fans, headlight on the nose. So for you guys that are modeling early BNSF, you're going to want to hop on board and order one of these, or maybe all three, depending on how big your railroad is. Now, while I'm thinking of it, you have until Friday, October 28th, to pre-order anything that we're looking at now. If you do have any questions, let's save them for the end of this segment, as I don't always see your comments while we're doing the live stream. But if you have a question on the GP38-2s, we'll certainly look for those as soon as we get done this segment. So coming up next is Union Pacific. Now, this is a really interesting history on these units. Union Pacific's initial order of GP38-2s was in 1974. They ordered 40 units, 2000 to 2039, and this ushered in a new batch of road switchers for the carrier. The first order included the common regular EMD steps, beacon, canvas-style sunshades, and large front EMD plow. UP went back the following year and ordered an additional 20 more. The second batch had switcher steps, which gave them a much more distinctive, different look. And by the 1970s, UP started to adopt a larger font name on the sides of their locomotives. One of the most notable detail changes was the horn being moved to the front of the cab and a piping conduit running along the roof of the unit. You can kind of see that here. Now, the Athearn development crew, they have added this feature, including the UP's modified coupler levers on both ends and the pilot's mounted lifting lugs. These were originally assigned to the Pacific Northwest, but could be found all over the system. And most of these units that we're going to be looking at here, they're still earning revenue for the UP today. Now, the ones that I'm going to show you here in 2016, this is a 1980s repaint. It's going to feature the larger lettering along the hood, numbers on the cab, and regular EMD steps. Here's 2022. This is a 1980s repaint. Larger lettering and numbers along the hood, UP shield on the cab, and regular EMD steps. Now the next one is going to be a little different. This is number 2047. This is also a 1980s repaint. It's going to have the larger lettering and numbers along the hood, UP shield on the cab, but this one does have the switcher style EMD steps. Now it's very subtle, so what I'll do is I'll have you zero in on this area here in the front and in the back. Let me go back to the standard EMD steps, and you can see there's a slight difference. Mainly, this was an era before they had the full stop rule. So brakemen could easily get on, get off the switcher style steps while the train was still moving. Obviously a practice that is no longer practiced today. So here's one that got a lot of buzz on the internet, the Chehalis and Western. The Chehalis Western was a Weyerhaeuser-owned Class 3 short line. It was based out of Chehalis, Washington. The railroad originally ran from Chehalis to Ruth, Washington, once Milwaukee road trackage. The primary commodity was logs and other wood products. They purchased 4 new GP38-2s from EMD in 1981. Now, operation ceased in 1992 and the locos were sold off to further service on the Golden Triangle Railroad and the Queen and Eastern Railroad. So both these units still survive, just in different paint now. These are based on 1981 paint schemes when they're brand new. Both CWWR 810 and 817 are going to feature some of the following proto-specific items. They are going to have lighted class lights, lighted number boards, Leslie 5-chime horn, dual xenon beacons, small fuel tank, weed cutter front plow, later phase body with the Q fans, and the corrugated grills and 88-inch nose. That's both common on both of these locomotives, number 810 and of course 817. A lot of you guys have been excited about these. Yeah, it's pretty neat to see a short line like this. We have seen some comments out there on social media with regards on the placement and sizing of some of the graphic elements of these. Rest assured, our product developer has been keeping in touch with you guys, and they will be adjusted so that the production run, when you get them next year, they will be spot on. So we are addressing those graphic elements that have been addressed in social media. We're aware of it, and we are working with our experts. We want to thank you for reaching out to us as well. We try to get as much information as possible. Sometimes we might miss something. That's where we rely on you to help us out. So coming up next is the Milwaukee Road. In the early 1970s, Milwaukee Road found that it needed to replace their aging fleet of low horsepower switching units due to the rising cost of maintenance. They intended to replace them with their GP9s, but they needed replacements for the GP9s in local service, so they purchased two groups of new EMD GP38-2s. The first group, the 350 to 355, were built in June of 1973 without dynamic brakes. However, the second group came in the fall of 1974 with dynamic brakes and were assigned to their western extension until it was embargoed and abandoned in 1980. Now we're offering two slightly different eras here. Milwaukee Road number 350 seen here is based on a paint scheme of 1973 to 1978. Non-dynamic brake hatch, beacon, and early cut levers. There's no notch pilots on 350. Same thing with 354. Non-dynamic brake hatch, beacon, early cut levers, and no notch pilots. Again, this is a paint scheme that they ran from 1973 until 1978. And last but not least, a little bit more modern paint scheme for the Milwaukee Road. This is based on the 78 to 1986, basically until Milwaukee Road was purchased by Sioux. This has the billboard style lettering, dynamic brake hatch, beacon, late coupler cut levers, and the notched pilot. Now, some of the features I want to talk about, we've done some updates on these models, and we're really excited about it. All of these are going to have now illuminated number boards. This is a feature that you've all been asking for, especially you guys that have seen them on our more modern 6-axles. You've been asking us to do this on our first and second generation 4-axles. So this is the answer to that. These will have operating number boards, and depending on the prototype, operating class lights. Now, not all of the locomotives that I've shown you today are going to have operating class lights, but certainly the Milwaukee Road, the Chehalis and Western, the Union Pacific, they're going to have operating class lights. Of course, you're going to have a lot of those Genesis details that you're already used to, such as the cut levers, MU hoses, train line hose, of course, a full cab interior, walkway tread, windshield wipers, lift rings, wire grab irons. I think you get the picture. These things are loaded, and they are also prototype specific. That means that every single locomotive, just because it's in the same railroad, doesn't mean they're going to be identical. They're going to have details that are based on their number. And if you really want to know what the minimum radius is on this, if you've got a small layout, then you can rest assured knowing that you can operate it on an 18-inch radius. So before we go on to the next item, let's go ahead and see what kind of questions we're getting out there. Matthew's pretty excited about the factory lit number boards. Yeah, that is something that DCC has really made it possible for us to do, and I really like the lit number boards myself. I'm really looking forward to the GP15s that we announced back in June. That was another one that is going to feature that. Les, you can take the New Englander and put him in Illinois, but you cannot take the New Englander out. I will say it as I can say it. I am not from the West Coast. Let's see. Louis wants to know, are you going to do it in undecorated? Not in this run. We've talked about that in the past. Undecorateds, while they seem to be high in demand, the sales don't usually show it. If you go to our website and go to our Contact Us page and select the Athearn product suggestion email and put that in there, well, we can definitely do that. Matthew, that goes with you too. If you'd like to see CP or any road of these 38-2s in the future, you can go to our website, go to that product suggestion email, and then put in what you like. If whatever you like, and who knows, it might actually show up. Chessie says, Jim Wiggins, any thoughts on SD18s? Well, first of all, no S. I cannot afford an S. I can only afford the letters of my name. Any thoughts on SD18s? I have not heard of anything going on, but let me tell you, our development staff is extremely busy, so who knows what they're working on out there. Let's see. No N scale tonight. We will talk about N scale on another night. Jake here likes the selection of road names. That's a good thing. I think, yeah, we did something a little bit different. We did some other stuff. Dale says it's a nightmare trying to make the lit number boards on the older models. Yeah, I've not attempted that, and nor will I. Fortunately, the guys at Athearn are going to take care of that for us. Eugene says, road and highway vehicles are needed to go with these locomotives, Jim. Yes, we hear you. In fact, I had the pleasure of stopping by and going to the Cornfield meet, which is a Fremo HO meet, this past weekend. I got to see some of you and talk with some of you, and had some great conversations with a lot of the modelers, and that was one of the topics. We are looking into hopefully updating our fleet of HO scale vehicles. No news yet, but we are working on some things, so stay tuned for that, and hopefully we will have some highway vehicles to your liking. Danny wants to know, what's the difference between a 38 and a 38-2? Well, briefly, you can, after the show, you can go back and hear, but the biggest difference was the electronics. The electronics went to the -2. It was a modular electronic setup. That was based on years of folks working on the original 38s and other EMD locomotives. Wiring was not modular on those locomotives, and it made it somewhat difficult to do simple maintenance on those. Once the -2 modular electrical system came into play with not only this locomotive but others, maintenance time was cut down dramatically. Now, spotting features is not always the case, but in the early days, some of the spotting features was the angle cab on the 38-2. If you look at behind the cab, the roof kind of extends a little bit to an angle, whereas the straight 38 just had a squared off roof. And the sight water glass. There's a sight water glass on the engineer side of the long hood on the 38-2s. That is absent on straight 38s. Now, that being said, just like everything with railroading, there's a caveat there. Since the 38s and the 38-2s were built many, many years ago, many of these have been rebuilt and repurposed and have changed quite a bit. So those are not only, you can't always tell a 38 from a 38-2 anymore, depending on who owns it and what has been done to it. But in the early days, that was an easy spotting feature. All right, let's go on to the next item. And we're going to talk a little bit about some Athearn HO boxcars now. And these boxcars are going to be appropriate for you guys running the 38-2s. So these are the 50-foot superior plug door boxcars. And the first one up here, BNSF 712766, this is a late 2000s boxcar. Now we're offering these, every road number has three different road, I'm sorry, every road has three different road numbers. They're going to have separately applied brake wheel and ladders. So they're going to be nicely detailed, perfect for operations, perfect for taking onto the modular show. Conrail guys, we didn't forget you. Conrail 1980s is extremely popular right now. Here's 369217. And again, 3 road numbers per road. Here's Chicago Northwestern, striking 1980s paint scheme. All of these will have 70-ton roller bearing trucks. I always thought this was a simple but nice paint scheme. This is Norfolk and Western. 296960. This is a 1980s paint scheme. And you'd see these in the early Norfolk Southern era as well. BC Rail fans, you are certainly getting some love this month. And this is one of my favorite boxcars. In fact, I always thought this was a neat paint scheme. This is a 1985 paint scheme, but they certainly lasted throughout the rest of the 80s and into the 90s. Now these retail for $37.99 each. Contact your dealer for your price. We advertise full retail, so talk with your dealer. That price is not necessarily indicative of what you will be paying. And last but not least, the Fruit Growers Express. It's a Western Pacific. 1971, the earlier of the paint schemes that we're offering. So real briefly, some of the features, besides some of the things that we've already talked about, these are going to have 33-inch machined metal wheels with the RP25 contours. Of course, they're going to be weighted to NMRA standards, body-mounted McHenry operating scale knuckle couplers, and they're all painted, printed for the most realistic possibility. And of course, minimum radius, 18 inches. So these are just great for your club layout, your modular layout, operations, you name it. All right, so let's go ahead and see what questions you have. We got a little bit of time for some questions. And head on over to the comments section to see what's going on over there. Why are Athearn and Walther suddenly releasing things that I want? I don't know. You know, that's just seems to be true every month, it seems like. I'm in the same boat. But there could be worse things that we could be spending our money on. I'm digging the Conrail boxcars. Yeah, you should. 1985 era. That was a cool era, and I'll let you in on a hint. You might want to pre-order those if you're a Conrail fan, because next month we're going to have a real treat for you if you're a Conrail fan. So just a heads up, you might want to pick up those boxcars, all 3 road numbers. They will come in very nicely with something that we're going to announce next month. Jason says, cool channel, just found it. Jason, thank you so much for that comment. We appreciate it. Hey, do us a favor while you're at it. Go over to our YouTube channel and like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell. That way you get notified every time a new video drops in. Now, of course, we drop in a new video every Tuesday. but we also do monthly announcements for what is going to be available for pre-order that specific month. And we do an Athearn Extra, which is a usually about an hour-long program where we have special guests. We talk more in depth about the models that we feature each month. And of course, we have other videos that we do just at random. Sometimes we interview the guys in development. Sometimes we're at a location. But do go over to our YouTube channel. And like I said, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and keep up to date with everything at Athearn. Daylight wants to know 38-2s and BNSF H3. I think that's a pretty good possibility. Not anytime soon, but probably in another few years. I think you'll see that. Let's see what else we have here. Jake wants to know, can we see some Norfolk Southern C40-9Ws in the 9800 and 9900 series in future runs? That's a possibility. What I would do is I'd recommend you go to our Athearn product suggestion email and put that in there. We just announced Dash 9s, so possibility of that being in the next run, I don't know. We'll see. And it also depends on what kind of tooling we have to do because as you've probably learned with our latest releases, both the Dash 9s and, of course, the AC 4400s, no two are alike. I got time for one, maybe two more questions, and then I will let you guys get back to some modeling. Got some new comments coming in. Les wants to know, will the latest GP38-2s have lit truck lights? These will not this time. Will they in the future? I don't know. We definitely wanted to get the lit number boards and the classification lights, mainly because those were the most requested lighting features on our 4-axle Jeeps. So we got that far. But no lit ground lights on this one. We'll end with John's excellent question here. John wants to know, what is the typical production and delivery timelines for products announced like this? So good question, John. So here's what happens. Let's take October as an example. Now, everything that you saw here tonight, as well as the previous Train Tuesdays, you have until Friday, October 28th to place your pre-orders. Now, let's say I want to get one of those Heritage 1 GP38-2s. I go to my local hobby shop and I let my dealer know that I'd like to pre-order 1 or 2 or 3 of those 38-2s. He puts in an order with Athearn. Athearn then sends all of that information over to our factory. Now, the production runs, as you know, take a little bit because there's production runs in front of this month. So it takes approximately about a year for those production runs to get built. So flash forward into next November, and the factory is now producing those GP38-2s. Typically 6 to 8 weeks before those land in our distribution center, marketing or myself gets production samples, and you might see them on social media or Train Tuesday or some type of live. That gives you an idea that you only have about 6 to 8 weeks to wait for your model. Flash forward another 6 to 8 weeks, and your dealer will give me a phone call or an email saying your BNSF GP38-2s are in stock. Come and pick them up, and it's time for you to enjoy them on your railroad. So that is typically how long that lasts. Now, of course, with everything going on in the world right now, we are experiencing some delays in shipping. We have a delay with our P42s, for example. These were originally to be released sometime this fall. We've had to push that back to April. That's not always the case, but with everything going on right now, some of the shipping has delayed those items getting into our distribution center. But for the most part, it takes about a year. So with that, I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. I want you to go back, do some modeling, be happy, be safe, be healthy, and above all, high greens. Good night, everybody. See you next time.